this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So this episode I'm calling Are Progressives Like Bernie Being Used as Camouflage for Corporatist Democrats / Biden? Question mark. So this is kind of a step back and assess episode where I'm not reacting to a specific bit of news but this is more of an ongoing concern of many people, and I'll describe what I meant by the title, which was, needs to be kept down to 100 characters. But anyway, in terms of camouflage, but this is an overall. This is part of my project of Politics 2100 to create a tapestry or a picture of the dynamics of American politics, in particular those that surround the Democratic Party and the efforts to enact progressive policy, including policy to address our climate emergency, and also our healthcare emergency. There's emergencies. There's a lot of different the state of our economic system, so forth and so on. Anyway, so all of these and social system, all of these issues are things that I think a progressive policy agenda might address, and if it were able to be enacted. And to get there, we need to engage in politics, and the current. In the last 5 years, we've seen the emergence of this movement of small dollar donation supported progressives that are independent of, to some degree, of corporate influence and corporate PAC money. At least that's in terms of their campaigns. And they seem to have shown signs that they are generally different than in terms of their actions in office, relative to corporate supported politicians, and because in our system in the United States, it's basically legalized bribery, or bribery is legalized. So corporations can dump all kinds of money into dark money, and also through various means basically fund the campaigns of numerous politicians, and therefore the politicians have obligations, and their actions in office reflect almost exactly the interests of their large donors, and therefore of the corporate oligarchy of the United States, or the hegemonic corporate system, where basically where hardly anything gets through, gets passed, or gets decided upon in courts and so forth and so on, that goes against the wishes of corporations. Not entirely, not always. There are occasional, so to speak, hiccups from the point of view of the corporations, but generally they get what they want. So anyway, so I have portrayed the Democratic Party as a good cop in the system, in a good cop, bad cop game. And the good cop Democratic Party needs to create the illusion. I've also called them a containment vessel for popular discontent. But anyway, in order to act as this containment vessel, or act as this good cop, they need to convince the public that they are better than the Republicans in terms of moral, ethical concern, empathy, understanding, that they're trying to lift people up, that they're trying to support people, they're trying to do things with government that are sort of in line with either what happened in the 1960s with the Great Society, what happened even in the 70s, even though it was Richard Nixon that was enacting them, things like the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, which happened to be enacted with Democratic Congresses, but with Richard Nixon as the president in the early 70s. But anyway, but that movement of reform in politics and in policy, and then even before then, probably as or more important was the New Deal and the World War II mobilization and the achievements of that time in terms of building a basic social safety net, and also if people are historically minded, they know that, and they study that period, they know that in fact that FDR had sort of a second Bill of Rights plan for basically kind of a social democratic system in the United States that never has been achieved. Okay, and we would probably not enact exactly what he intended or what he would have been able to enact in the 1940s. But anyway, but still, it was an effort to do that, and he was a politician who was relatively independent of the corporate interest of his time and of the ruling. Even though he was of the ruling elite, he was fairly independent, and so anyway. But since then, the Democrats have, at least since the 1980s and late 80s and 90s, they have taken a turn toward corporatist influence, and even embracing corporations in the market and so forth and so on as being the optimal form of social organization, that government bureaucracies were the enemy, and that were the worst form of modern social organization, and markets and corporate and basically people price mechanisms and using private actors to implement social public purposes of various kinds would be the optimal way to do that, and also to scale back on the government's, if possible, scale back on the government's involvement in those things. So anyway, but still, the Democrats need to echo, in some form or another, the idea that despite their ideas about markets and about that somehow they are the more caring, they are more likely to use government to protect people, they're more likely to, at least in theory. So and this to be the good cop, and then the Republicans would be the bad cop who's saying, like, no, you get exactly what you deserve, and we're about performance and only performance, and I mean that I'm stylizing the Republican ideology, but anyway, it's basically like basically if you're rich, you deserve to be rich, and if you're poor, you deserve to be poor, and we're just the party that sort of gets us out from under, so to speak, the illusion that that's not the case. Okay, so it's a social Darwinist vision, and so they're the bad cops. And anyway, but we've seen, and this is why I'm doing this video now, is we've seen that Biden is really, he is also like his predecessor in office, Democratic predecessor Barack Obama. He feigned to the left, but then really is of the center right. So he's essentially adjacent to the Republican Party, the sort of traditional, now traditional Republican Party, like of Mitch McConnell or other corporate, Paul Ryan, so forth and so on. These people who were basically pro-capitalist and libertarian tending, but not radical, neo-fascists essentially, who or wanting to just rewrite the entire, at least they claim not to want to totally overthrow the system that had emerged in the 1930s and 40s and 60s, but to, let's say, to undermine it in a more subtle way. Okay, so but anyway, but Biden has shown himself to be, in his latest or in this recording of him praising and making love to Mitch McConnell at the National Prayer Breakfast. It's pretty, it's both shocking but also not surprising, as I said in the previous episode when I discussed that, that someone like Biden would have these feelings and this feeling of common friendship, let's say, with McConnell. And so this whole theater, which Bernie Sanders also participated in, of trying to show himself to be, maybe perhaps he'd want to do something FDR-like. He might want to, during the campaign, but meanwhile in office has been entirely passive, and particularly, for instance, in student loan debt forgiveness, which is an area which he has there are no Congress people and senators that can't have anything to do with his decisions in that area. So he can't claim that anybody's standing in his way in that area. It's been demonstrated that the president can stop loan payments and indefinitely put them on hiatus, essentially then forgiving student loans, and it's really supposedly, it is the government that's essentially the lender and therefore the creditor in this area. So it's really just a matter of editing the books, so to speak, and as I have advocated for, and has been shown by the modern monetary theory economists of various people in that school, that the U.S. government doesn't need the money of the borrowers. It can write checks, depending on it can write as many checks as it wants. Of course, there's the danger of inflation. In this case, these checks were already written. Forgiving them would free up money to potentially for consumer spending by borrowers, but that's another issue. These are people who are suffering. There's a backlog of whatever consumption, and then they would, as they're paying off a second mortgage in terms of their student loans or whatever it is, whatever their repayment amounts are. But anyway, that they would then be able to participate in the economy, and they would create demand, and the demand might or may not, inflate one or the other prices. But still, that's you're taking a block away from, or an impediment away from some of the less fortunate people in the economy, and some of the younger people in the economy, though not all of them are young, and then releasing them. So there's really, but you can have that discussion, and that could be modeled, okay? But that's not part of the discussion. There's basically radio silence from Biden. So Biden doesn't really want to forgive student loan debt. So it's really so the question then becomes, and this is the subject of this episode, are progressives creating a camouflage or doing free PR for Biden by or not just Biden, but for the Democratic Party, the corporate Democratic Party, by even just being in that party and trying to do progressive things? And are they creating window dressing for instance, earnest acts that are window dressing for the party? For instance, look, they can point to AOC and say, look, AOC is part of our party, and she is, she's kind of I mean, among other things, she is very engaged in her district. She is a very good communicator. She uses, and she's talking all the time about the work she's doing with her constituents. So, and in a way is, I mean, she does a form of social work, and I'm saying this in the, literally, this is what all representatives should be doing, a form of social work with their constituencies, like where are the needs and finding the needs, or social entrepreneurship, whatever you want to call it, but not in the sense of profit making and whatever, but simply just finding where are the needs, and then trying to either advertise existing resources. So a lot of the time, AOC is telling her constituents, well, if you have this problem, go to this agency. If you have that problem, go to this agency. So now other representatives do some of that same work. I'm not saying she's alone in doing that, but that earnest public service attitude of her and some of her other compatriots in the squad, and also Bernie Sanders to some degree has some of that attitude, though I'm not following how he's dealing with his Vermont constituents. But anyway, that there's are they creating buy-in for the voters for the Democratic Party by saying, well, look, we are a big tent, and we have in our tent some of these people who are more left-wing, okay, or more public service oriented, or nicer, okay? They're nicer, they're more empathic than me, the leader, in this case, me being Joe Biden, or Nancy Pelosi being the leader of the House, that they're part of our tent, so we can take credit for their, but while at the same time undermining them or fighting them in the background. And so this is something that now you have people who are for instance, you have this what I call the sort of the left or right. Are they left or are they right? "Quote unquote" progressives or leftists who see it as their duty to only criticize the squad, or only particularly focusing on the squad, or they don't talk so much about Bernie Sanders, but they think that this is all and that the squad, the force the vote controversy, that supposedly the squad could have blocked Nancy Pelosi from becoming speaker and then gotten someone else to become speaker, and when no one from the Democrats at least was running against her to be speaker. But they insist that, well, they could have used their small increment of votes to be able to maybe they're 10 out of a caucus of 200 and something, and so anyway, so there's ideas that they are not hardcore enough, they're not that they are sort of being used, and they're too nice, and they need to be meaner, okay? And so there's that controversy, and they would be, in the words of this current video, they would be saying, yes, they are being used as camouflage for they're continuing the grift, they're continuing the sham caring of the Democratic Party. They are continuing contributing to that image, and and this is I don't agree with exactly their take on it, but I am opening up in this video the possibility that yes, there is an element to which progressives and their good works can be turned against them by corporate Democrats, because the corporate Democrats are running this good cop scam, and they need where the rubber meets the road, where the actual action seems to be focused on giveaways to corporations, giveaways to the military-industrial complex, and also just doing the being errand people for the corporate overlords. And so, but they need to create this system, this good cop bad cop system, this veil over the veil over the donor class, the dominance of the donor class in government, by saying, well, no, you have this choice between these two parties, and one is, nicer than the other one is more hard edged, and you have to decide which one you want. And creating this. So do the progressives create that, or help? They don't alone create that. Not at all. No one can say that. But are they part of this game? And so this is where I think progressives need to be cleverer, and they need to start intervening in ways. The progressives, if they are sincere, I believe. So let me first start. Unlike these force the vote people like Jimmy Dore and I think Jordan Charlton, or there are other people who seem to enjoy and there's Max Blumenthal. There are other people who really enjoy taking down the efforts of these people to do something somewhat more progressive in the Democratic Party, and they don't offer an alternative of, well, how are you going to break free of the Democratic Party in electoral politics, if you're doing electoral politics, and not then facilitate the victory of the Republicans. And some of them say, well, no, I don't care. I'm an accelerationist, meaning accelerationist means a leftist that's been around for a while as a term, means that someone who thinks, well, the worse things get, the more likely a revolution is going to happen, and therefore, let's make things worse. So, but anyway, so I think that, so my take is that the people like Bernie and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, are sincere in wanting to get their sincere social democrats, or maybe even left of social democrats, but they're and they are anti-corporate in their politics, and pro-working people in their politics. So I think that that's true about them. But whether they can be that effectively in the Democratic Party is a question, and it's a question one needs to ask oneself continually. But I think they could. Step one is, I think there needs to be a caucus, a true progressives caucus with some litmus test in terms of votes, in terms of funding, where people who are funded by corporations, for instance, having a no corporate funding caucus, okay, and that would be one place to start. So they need to organize themselves and have some kind of strategy among them. It feels like they're somewhat maybe they're on the phone with each other all the time, and maybe it's very informal. Maybe they have their own Slack, but they or their joint Slack, but they need to have a caucus that is distinct from the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which has too many vaguely, really just corporatist politicians in it. And then, so that's number one. And number two is, I think they need to, when they have achieved that, they need to think, how do we position ourselves at every turn, and to really maybe not have exactly talking points where they all are basically saying the same thing, but at least having positions that are complementary to each other when something happens that is, for instance, Joe Biden's hesitation to use his powers as let's back up. In the Build Back Better, I guess say fiasco, or the bipartisan infrastructure fiasco, that they would publicly call out Pramila Jayapal and say, hey, Pramila, we're not authorizing you to do this. We're going to go vote against you because X, Y, and Z, and to split apart the two bills, and make it have a press conference, so forth and so on. Now this means straining their relationships with people like Pramila Jayapal, and it goes against the culture of the Democratic Party to do this, but I think that they need to, and maybe there are other ways to do it that are more more to their liking, but still some conflict and some open conflict needs to happen. Okay, and they need to also be drawing on their own moral authority to and their moral, and I think that in the Build Back Better interaction, or they were always saying, well, this is Joe Biden's agenda, and I think that was something of a mistake, or at least to only rely on that, because I don't think Joe Biden sort of was what he was supposedly his agenda was kind of a trial balloon that he was throwing out there. He doesn't seem really committed to it. But they should say, this is the agenda that will address the needs of the American people, and always be focusing on hammering on that. In some sense, this would be maybe talking points that they all have, and that they would need to be constantly in front of people and the press and hammering away on this particular idea that the American people need this, American people need that. Now, of course, they said those things in different forms, but that having a unified message, and also certain, for instance, dollar in that, with that package continued to shrink, but saying certain dollar amounts to talk about, and saying, like, look, we need this dollar amount to do X. Eventually it came out that, in fact, oh yes, there's not enough money in this to really remedy the lead pipes problem. But that was sort of after the horse, ran out of the barn. So, and that kind of disorganized approach to it might have been prevented if they had pooled their resources, or gotten, and worked together as something of a sub-caucus or caucus, so anyway, so the in general, I think so there needs to be more organization. There needs to be a strategy, and also they need to really, again, in public, start to embarrass some of these people who are doing embarrassing things. And they need to get used, those people need to get used, if they want to be leaders of that party, they need to get used to being criticized openly, and saying, look, I have this opinion, being very frank with the public. And at times they've appeared to be not so frank, and to be sort of so anyway, so I think that if they create this culture of dissent, and of open debate, or more open debate, and also get more organized in terms of their own ranks, I think they will have more of an impact, and also be less likely to be used by, also this used by the corporatist leadership of the party, as kind of, well, it's kind of nice that to treat them, to patronize them as unrealistic. They're not really playing the hardball games that we're playing at the leadership level. So they need to create slowly in people's minds an alternative vision of how things could run politically within the party, and not just allow the now almost octogenarian leadership of that party, or in some cases octogenarian leadership of the party, run and shape the narrative entirely. So anyway, I hope this video addressed some of the issues regarding this sort of internal party dynamic in the Democratic Party. And I hope, if you have any thoughts about this issue, if you could share them in the comments, that would be great. If you like the video, please like it. And if you are enjoying, in general, Politics 2100, please subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video.